Hello everyone, one more video here on the channel, and today's theme is going to be the Holocaust of the wedges. The account will never close. I'm making this video based on a text that I wrote in August 2020, which I published in Legato. In other words, for those who don't like text, this video here is now the movie version of the text. So there's no more excuse for when the movie comes out, I watch it. I made an introduction, analyzed the precedents, and made a prognosis in relation to the women of the 90s, which is the focus of the text, how we got to the current situation, and why this generation of women of the 90s is going to fit into an industrial scale, a gigantic scale. It's not going to be in retail, because we're going to have a big collapse of single women in these 20 years that we've just entered. Just an addendum before getting into the subject. This term, the Holocaust of the wedges, is not from my authorship. I copied this term. In a way, due to the genius of the term, it was from Hakun that I copied, who is a person that I admire immensely. I think he's a genius in the analysis of anthropological, social, female psyche, midgetal, the nuances of women to the state. Anyway, Hakun is admired by all the men who have had contact with his material. Hakun, for those who have never heard of him, writes RSICC, and he uses the Goxaneme as a symbol. He's operating in alternative platforms today in relation to YouTube, but there's still a lot of his stuff on YouTube, because his analysis, his material, is of a gigantic primacy. So many people still study this material. Hakun, when he made his video, The Holocaust of the Wedges, he analyzed the prism of birth, comparing countries that are already at an absurdly low birth rate, such as South Korea, Japan, and exposing how this would affect Brazil, because here we also have a birth rate of 1.71 children per woman in Brazil, which is very low. Several European countries, which are seen as more progressive than Brazil, still have a higher birth rate than Brazil, such as France, for example, Denmark, and so on. But I want to analyze another prism here. I'm not going to analyze the prism of birth, because this already has a brilliant material from my prism here, of how women are going to fit in, specifically the women of the 90s, that is, women who are today, from 21 to 31 years old, will be about how the excess of emotions, and the specific Instagram, I don't like to use the term social network, because, as I explained in my first video on the channel, social network is not all the same. Orkut didn't destroy women, Facebook didn't either, and Flaga didn't either. TikTok, I want to analyze at another time, because I think it's more for the 2000s generation, and I also think that TikTok arrived a little late in this gigantic bubble that has formed, but that's a topic for another video. So, quickly making a precedent, a parallel, if you look today at the women who are fit after 30, they are the women of the 80s. The women of the 80s, in general, most of them got married, as much as you have a lot of divorces. Everything I'm talking about here is Brazil level. When I talk about another specific country, I make it very clear. We are talking about Brazil here. If you look at the women of the 80s, most of them got married, and you have a lot of divorces. You will have a lot of divorces and single mothers too. But in general, generalizing, let's put it this way. There weren't as many women engaged in the 80s as people think there are. I repeat, there are a lot of divorced women in the 80s, but the level of demand of these women is much lower than that of the 90s, which is the core of the video. The women of the 80s had a much more analogous youth. Let's put it this way. They didn't get this Instagram story time. There was no smartphone. This is very important. The smartphone issue. There was a very big separation between computer. There is a very big separation between having a desktop at home, a notebook, and a smartphone. Because when these women went to parties, clubs, bars, they disconnected in a certain way. Got it. So they didn't have a smartphone peeping at them, giving likes, or wanting casual sex with them. They went out and, in a way, enjoyed the night, obviously, with all the hypergamy, arrogance, etc. But the world was more real. It was more human contact. Let's put it this way. So these women didn't engage precisely because they didn't get this excess of emotions. It wasn't very easy, even if the woman was very beautiful. In 2010, for example, a woman who was born in 1985, in 2010, she is at the height of 25 years. So she wouldn't have much access to guys who live 1,000 kilometers from her, to a football player, to a singer, to prominent doctors on Instagram, to heirs from other cities, etc. So she had much fewer options. So even if it was against her will, she ended up being content with a guy of the same level or a little above. So as much as it is not far from being a perfect scenario, it was also far from being a scenario of civilizational collapse. Things were actually working there. So everything changed for the women of 90s, precisely because of the smartphone. This gradual increase in social networks, this transition from Orkut to Facebook, and then comes Instagram, and then comes the point where there is an effect on their heads in which there has never been any precedent in the history of humanity. So it is very common for you to see women that you know from your city, or sometimes not even so close. You've heard of them, that you know that these women have no money, no income, or even have some income but not compatible with the lifestyle they are living. This is happening because they have a lot of access to places where a tiny number of men can afford them, and sometimes they are not even banking. They just let them go to the party, to the boat, and everything else. The rich men are not as stupid as some men think they are. On the contrary, in fact, these guys are much smarter than we think they are. So women started to frequent environments in which Instagram allows you to glamorize this environment. And then there is a whole matter of social camaraderie, what is more elitist and what is not, and women simply collapse with it. So I call this generation of the 90s a lost saffron, which was a generation that, unlike their parents in the 80s, who had no access to any of this glamorous life, they had and still have a lot. So it is very common that a woman in the 90s, that is grade 6 up, has already had contact with some alpha in her life, either with casual sex or with temporary monogamy. Some more experts in the game of seduction managed to cheat and date. Other, more experts, will still be able to get married, have children, and have a quiet life. But as a rule, the contact they had is very ephemeral. It's usually a little chat, casual sex. When the guy is there in despair, and in the woman's head, it is never casual sex. Saitama, from Attitude Alpha, made a phenomenal video about it today. He even posted, "I recommend you see it later, because women get fucked up after sex, because they get depressed, they are discarded." But anyway, every woman today has practically had some relationship, whether it's a more heated conversation, or it usually ends up being a temporary casual sex with some more alpha guy. And they are marked for it. From the moment of their playfulness, they are marked for it because they are seeing the few whores who manage to get the rich husband, the husband of dreams, and on Instagram, honeymoon in the Maldives, marriage in Snow Miguel, Dos Malegres Alagoas, vacation in Aspen, Colorado, or Switzerland, to ski. And the women, they don't touch themselves. They really believe that there is a plan of God, something greater for them, that they deserve everything, and it's never too late. Saitama beats Attitude Alpha beats a lot on this. Never too late, which is the biggest trap that exists for women to believe that everything has its time, etc. And time is passing. And what is the current panorama of Brazil? I made this explanation of the precedents that the women of the 80s, they end up, or those who fit in, they end up accepting guys of a lower level, which they can call of Captain Selvaputa, or average guys, because they didn't have so many emotions. So their brain is much less damaged. Note that I'm not making any moral judgment here. This channel is not a moral judgment channel. We analyze the psychological, physiological effects through the receptors of dopamine, which is the hormone of pleasure that Instagram and other types of emotions, like walking on a boat, visit an apartment of a super prominent guy, in which he will only have sex with the woman, and then discard. This type of emotion in the woman damages practically permanently. If it's not permanent, it's like this. It's a very long term. It's only if there was a violent recycling, so that I can recover it there. I don't believe much in that. So, the women of the 80s accept guys, more normal. The women of the 90s don't, because they are clogged with these emotions. But they didn't touch each other. They believe when these guys have sex with her, in discard, they believe that this is the result of, it's not supposed to be, it's not supposed to be, what my God is. Keeping women really like to appeal to God, for mysticism, parentalism, for astrology, and several other shamanism, to think that they will find the perfect guy. Today is Sunday. Just see what Sunday night is on the Instagram of the single woman. Just a little phrase of sophism, reflection, all this crap that's on bloggers' post. So, the current panorama of Brazil today, my people, is that 80% of the Brazilian population of men earn up to 2 reals, 300 per month. The richest 10% of Brazil starts earning more or less $1,000 per month, about our $5,000. 5,5 reais. That is, you have a country of 200 million inhabitants, in which the richest 10% is earning $1,000 per month. If you say this to an American, for example, to a Canadian, to a Swiss, he will collapse. He will not understand. It's like this. The richest 10% is earning $1,000 per month, and women have no idea about it. And women are doing very well in the labor market today, compared to what many women are making money, not getting rich. It is very difficult to get rich in Brazil, but I'm saying this in case any woman falls from parachutes here on the channel, and says, you think women can't be independent? I don't know what. They can, I believe. They can. Yes, there are many women there. Professional, liberal, doctor, dentist, architect, women working with digital marketing, with e-commerce, right? There are many women who are using social networks to make money too, right? But this does not decrease their hypergamy. On the contrary, it even increases, right? The woman who earns 6,000 reais. The women of the 80s, who earned that, they accepted. The guy who earns 8,000 reais, which is a little above. Okay? A hypergamy there, 1 or 2 steps above. There's no way to change this, it's nature. And human biology. This is not sexism. It's not that women are interested in anything This is biology. But today, you have a bunch of unemployed women who earn 5,000 reais a month, which is a guy who earns 200,000 reais a month. Right? In addition to these guys who earn this, in Brazil, being almost non-existent, most of them are what we call white-bellied old men, which are the boomers, who control almost all the money in Brazil, which is the generation born in 1946 until 1964. So the money in Brazil is concentrated in the hands of a few older guys who are already married, who are already parents, grandparents. They are not available on the market, right? So, yes, guys from 20 to 35 years old who earn this, apart from the heirs, are a tiny number of men, right? Tiny, right, but it's a sufficient number to bug their whole heads, bug their heads to the point that they want these guys, and nothing gets out of their heads that they don't deserve this. So it's obvious that the account won't close. You don't have to be very smart. You don't have to be a prophet of the apocalypse. You don't have to be nihilist. You don't have to be black pill. You don't have to be negative. You don't have to be any of these adjectives for you to understand that the account won't close. Right, because there's no way. It's simply a mathematical question, right, in which women are doomed to enter this decadent holocaust. A few lucky ones will still be able to cheat the husband of their dreams. Others, there is a very small number of women who are really detached, that they really are what they say they are in the sentences. So, I met one in my whole life until today. Okay, I met one that really, practically everything. One of hundreds of thousands of people that I've met throughout my life. I met a woman until today who is really detached, but she's still 25 years old. Right, let's see if it will last until 30, because until 25, 24, I'm seeing that they're already desperate to date, right? And men are running away from dating like the devil runs away from the cross. So, I think the next video that I'm going to do will be on this topic. Men don't want to date anymore. I'll explain why men don't want to date anymore. But then the prognosis is this, right? The prognosis is that there's no way to close the account. Right? Women, they won't accept. Then there's a counterpoint that someone can say, in Brazil, there's a lot of mangina. For those who don't know, right? I always say these terms. I know most people know, but it may be that someone falls from a parachute that is not familiar with this term. So, I always like to say, always that which is man of man. Right? And Gina, a vagina. It's the guy who does everything for a vagina. Right? The guy who is a slave of vagina. There's a lot of guys like that in Brazil. Right, but today, right now, a compliment to the men of the 90s. I see that many younger guys, right, and from the 80s too, but I think the 90s are waking up more. The men of the 80s were more married, let's say, but a lot of guys are waking up. Got it? But a lot of guys. So, there's a lot of mangina in Brazil. There still is, only that they are men of almost zero sexual value, right? That are men without money, without physical beauty, without social standing. These guys, these women of the 90s, will not accept, right? So, this is the prognosis that I make. A lot of women, a lot of single women, beautiful, right? Women were very beautiful due to democratization and easy access to aesthetic procedures, right? So, several aesthetic procedures, gym, diet, etc., right? Lip filling. This left many beautiful middle women who are having experiences with a reduced number of men, that is, in Brazil, from 1% to 3%. At most, if you are very optimistic, 5% of men are managing to stay with most women. Women are not managing to physicalize these guys because these guys are seeing that the environment is poor and they don't want to date. They just pretend they want something there and then they leave, right? Because, as Saitama said in the video there, if the guy says, in the video he made today, about why women regret after sexual intercourse, if the guy says he only wants sex, the woman will run away. So, the guy simulates their ecophagistism, an archetype there of Don Juan, who is a conqueror, and he has sex and then disappears, right? So, there is no way to close the account, my friends. The conclusion is this. Okay, there will not be Captain Salvaputa, which they will accept enough to save all. Some women accept, okay, I'll make a video about women. If there are women, yes, there is. It's a tiny number, but there are. They will pay the bill on behalf of most women who are in this crazy life of pergamia on Instagram, right? Some will be able to, if it's a tiny number. They will also be able to, despite all the excessive emotions, pick carousel and everything else, they will still be able to save themselves, right? But, as a rule, you will see a lot of women falling out. They're in the 90s. Okay, because they want impossible guys, these impossible guys don't want to date, even if she lowers the level a little, the middle class guys, the high middle class guy, there is also waking up, they won't want to. What will be left of a man in need? Imagine. It will only be that that I say in the sexual market. Okay, it is not minority. In the financial sense, it is what they consider right, which are invisible men to them. So, that's it, my friends. This was the theme of today's video. I hope you comment, like it. If you want to make any criticism, it's at your disposal. And if you can, subscribe to. A big hug to everyone, and until the next video.